Something big is shifting behind the scenes of Hazbin Hotel, and if you've been paying close attention, you can feel it. Not in a loud, flashy way, but in that quiet, unsettling sense that the story we thought we understood is about to be flipped on its head. A recent interview with Vivziepop didn't just give us casual updates, it subtly confirmed that Season 3 is where everything starts to matter. The slow setup is over, the rules are about to change, and the future of both Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss may be far more connected than we ever expected. Over the past few seasons, Hazbin Hotel has taken its time. Season 1 introduced the world, the tone, the chaos. Season 2 expanded on it, deepened the villains, and tested the characters. But according to Vivziepop herself, all of that was still just the groundwork. In this interview, she made it clear that Seasons 1 and 2 were never meant to be the real escalation. They were the calm before the storm. Season 3 is where the story begins to rise, where secrets stop hiding in the background and finally come into the light. And that alone should tell fans that what's coming next isn't just another villain of the season situation. One of the most important takeaways from the interview is how intentional the long-term planning really is. Vivziepop explained that Hazbin Hotel was designed with a multi-act structure in mind, almost like one massive musical broken into chapters. Right now, we're leaving the end of the first act and stepping directly into the second. That means the show is no longer focused on just setting up personalities or surface-level conflicts. Instead, it's preparing to challenge the core ideas of heaven, hell, redemption, and punishment. In other words, the questions the show has been teasing since Episode 1 are finally about to get real answers, and not necessarily comforting ones. Season 3, in particular, is positioned as the moment where lore starts recontextualizing everything we thought we knew. Vivziepop hinted that certain truths about the nature of hell, and even the idea of redemption itself, may not align with what the characters, or the audience, have believed so far. That's huge, because Hazbin Hotel has always been built on the idea that people can change, that souls can improve, that maybe hell isn't the end. But what happens if the system itself is flawed? What happens if heaven isn't the reward everyone thinks it is? These are the kinds of questions Season 3 seems ready to confront head-on. What makes this especially interesting is how this shift impacts the characters emotionally. When a story moves from setup into rising action, it usually means characters are about to be tested in irreversible ways. Relationships will strain, motivations will clash, and some characters may be forced to choose between what they believe is right and what keeps them safe. Vivziepop's comments strongly suggest that Season 3 won't just expand the world, it will pressure the characters until something breaks. And once that happens, there's no going back to the lighter tone of earlier seasons. At the same time, this interview subtly confirmed that the story isn't narrowing, it's expanding. Season 3 isn't the beginning of the end, it's the beginning of the climb. With Season 4 already planned as a continuation of this rising action, the consequences of Season 3 won't be wrapped up neatly. Instead, they'll echo forward, shaping everything that follows. That's why this season feels so important. It's not about shock value, it's about direction. Once Season 3 sets the path, the show is committed to following it all the way to the final act. And this is exactly why fans should be paying close attention right now, because the changes coming in Season 3 won't always be loud or obvious. Some of them will be subtle. A line of dialogue that suddenly means something more, a character decision that feels small but has massive implications later. Vivziepop's interview made one thing very clear. Hazbin Hotel is done warming up. The real story is about to begin, and everything after this point is going to hit harder than anything we've seen before. One of the most revealing parts of Vivziepop's interview wasn't just about where the story is going, but who is about to take control of it. For a long time, the villains in Hazbin Hotel felt like looming threats rather than fully unleashed forces. Dangerous, yes, but restrained. Season 3 is where that restraint disappears. According to Vivziepop, the way the antagonists were originally planned has been completely reshaped by early renewals, and that reshaping is going to make each season feel more focused, more intense, and far more personal. Originally, the three Vs were meant to operate almost like a constant presence, overlapping villains who all pushed the story forward at the same time. Vox, Valentino, and Velvet weren't supposed to take turns. They were supposed to exist together, always causing chaos in the background. But with the show being greenlit further ahead than expected, Vivziepop was able to spread them out, giving each one their own moment to truly shine. Season 2 leaned heavily into Vox. Season 3, however, appears to be setting the stage for Valentino in a way that completely changes how we're meant to see him. Up until now, Valentino has often been treated as the least intimidating of the three Vs. He's cruel, abusive, and manipulative, especially toward Angel Dust. But in the larger power structure of Hell, he's usually been portrayed as secondary to Vox. Vox had the vision. Vox had the control. Vox had the technology and the influence. Valentino, by comparison, felt impulsive, almost childish at times. But Vivziepop's comments strongly suggest that this perception may have been intentional misdirection. With Vox's position destabilized, Valentino is no longer being held back, and that's where things get uncomfortable. A villain who was previously constrained by someone smarter and more calculating can become far more dangerous when they're finally given full control. Valentino doesn't need to be strategic in the same way Vox was. His power comes from exploitation, emotional dominance, and chaos. And Season 3 looks like it's the moment where that ugliness is no longer contained to just one character's storyline. This is especially important when you consider how personal Valentino's role in the story already is. Angel Dust's trauma isn't theoretical. It's lived in, ongoing, and unresolved. If Season 3 truly puts Valentino at the forefront, then it's not just about raising the stakes of the plot. It's about forcing characters to confront damage that's been quietly festering since the beginning of the show. Vivziepop has hinted that Season 3 doesn't just escalate events, it deepens them. That means we may finally see the consequences of Valentino's actions ripple outward, affecting far more than just Angel. At the same time, Lilith's shadow is growing larger. While Valentino may take center stage as an active threat, Lilith represents something much more existential. Vivziepop has repeatedly emphasized that the Morningstar family, and Lilith in particular, are central to Season 3's direction. That creates a fascinating contrast. Valentino is a very grounded kind of evil, intimate, abusive, and ugly. Lilith, on the other hand, feels mythic, symbolic. She's tied directly to the foundations of Hell itself. And Season 3 appears to be where those two forms of danger begin to coexist. This balance is what makes the upcoming season feel so tense. We're not just dealing with one villain or one type of conflict. We're dealing with personal trauma colliding with cosmic truth. While Valentino represents the rot within Hell's social structure, Lilith may represent the truth behind why that structure exists at all. And as Vivziepop hinted, some of that truth may reframe everything the characters believe about redemption, punishment, and freedom. What's even more interesting is how deliberately slow this buildup has been. Vivziepop openly admitted that earlier seasons were intentionally flatter in their progression, not because the story lacked direction, but because it needed space to breathe. Season 3 marks the point where that patience pays off. Characters are no longer reacting to surface-level threats. They're being pulled toward inevitable confrontations. And once those confrontations begin, there's no easy reset. All of this makes Season 3 feel less like a continuation and more like a turning point. The villains are no longer background forces. They're drivers of change. And the choices they make, especially Valentino's, aren't just going to define this season. They're going to shape the emotional and narrative direction of everything that comes after. While Season 3 is shaping up to be the moment where Hazbin Hotel truly finds its momentum, Vivziepop also dropped hints that stretch far beyond just one season. In the interview, she talked openly about how the show is structured across multiple acts, and that perspective changes how we should be looking at everything that's about to happen. This isn't just about individual villains or isolated conflicts anymore. It's about a story that's slowly tightening its grip, pulling every character toward an ending that's been planned from the start. Vivziepop described the series as one long, 3-act story spread across 5 seasons. Seasons 1 and 2 were the end of Act 1, introducing the world, establishing the rules, and letting the audience settle into the chaos of Hell. Season 3 marks the true beginning of Act 2, and Act 2 is always where things get complicated. This is the part of the story where truths are revealed, alliances are tested, and the original premise starts to crack under pressure. It's no longer about whether the hotel can exist. It's about what its existence actually means. One of the most striking things Vivziepop suggested is that Season 3 will introduce lore that forces both the characters and the audience to re-evaluate the nature of heaven and hell themselves. Up until now, heaven has mostly existed as a distant goal, an idealized destination that redemption supposedly leads to. But Season 3 may challenge that assumption. There's a strong implication that heaven isn't as simple or as pure as it's been presented. And if that's true, then Charlie's dream isn't just difficult. It may be fundamentally flawed. This kind of revelation doesn't just change the plot, it changes the emotional foundation of the show. If the system of judgment is broken, then redemption becomes something far more complex than just earning a ticket out of hell. It becomes a moral question. Should characters even want to be redeemed into a system that might be just as corrupt? Vivziepop hinted that Season 3 begins to introduce information that reframes everything the characters thought they were working toward, and that kind of shift has the potential to split characters apart rather than bring them together. Season 4, according to Vivziepop, is where Act 2 begins to transition into Act 3. That's important because it suggests that Season 3 won't resolve these questions. It will ignite them. The fallout from whatever truths are revealed won't be immediate. Instead, Season 4 will likely deal with the emotional and narrative consequences, wrapping up smaller arcs while pushing the story closer to its endgame. That means the decisions made in Season 3 will echo forward in ways that may not fully pay off until the final season. This long-term structure also explains why certain characters have been held back. Some figures in Hazbin Hotel feel underexplored on purpose, and Vivziepop's comments make it clear that this was intentional. Act 2 is when those characters step forward, not just to fill space, but to challenge the direction of the story itself. Their backstories, motivations, and hidden connections are likely to become central as the show moves closer to its climax. What makes this especially compelling is that Vivziepop isn't describing a sudden tonal shift. She's describing a slow tightening of the narrative. Season 3 isn't about shock for the sake of shock. It's about destabilization, taking the familiar pieces of the world and rearranging them just enough that nothing feels safe anymore. And when a story does that successfully, it forces the audience to engage on a deeper level because you can no longer rely on old assumptions. By framing the show this way, Vivziepop essentially confirmed that Hazbin Hotel has been playing the long game all along. Every joke, every musical number, every seemingly small interaction has been building toward this middle act where the story finally demands answers. Season 3 is where those questions start to surface, and once they do, the show can't turn back. Another major point from Vivziepop's interview that fans can't ignore is how the future seasons are being shaped around individual characters, not just big events. While Season 3 pushes the story into Act 2 and begins unraveling the deeper truth about heaven and hell, Season 4 is already being positioned as something much more personal. And surprisingly, that future may revolve around characters who, up until now, have stayed mostly in the background. Vivziepop confirmed that the 3 Vs were never meant to fade quietly into the story. Instead, each of them was designed to lead the narrative at different points, with Vox taking center stage in Season 2 and Valentino rising in Season 3. That leaves Velvet waiting in the shadows, and that's where things start to feel unsettling. Velvet has always been the most mysterious of the trio. She doesn't rely on raw power or public dominance like Vox, and she doesn't use overt control and abuse like Valentino. Her influence feels quieter, more calculated, and that kind of villain can be far more dangerous when the time is right. If Season 4 truly becomes Velvet's season, then it may also mark a major tonal shift. Instead of large-scale chaos or emotional abuse driving the conflict, we could be looking at something colder and more deliberate. Vivziepop hinted that earlier plans had all 3 villains operating at once, but with the new structure, Velvet's arc may be built on the aftermath of Vox and Valentino's downfall, and revenge, especially when fueled by loss, tends to produce some of the darkest storylines. What makes this even more interesting is how clearly the show mirrors its heroes and villains. Vivziepop has spoken before about intentional parallels, and the interview reinforces that idea. The 3 Vs reflect the structure of Alastor's circle in subtle but meaningful ways. Vox and Alastor both act as leaders. Valentino and Husk serve as morally complex right-hand men, And that leaves Velvet and Nifty, two characters who seem wildly different on the surface, but may be far more connected than fans realize. Nifty has largely existed as comic relief so far, but Season 4 may finally push her into the spotlight. If Velvet becomes a central antagonist, then Nifty could serve as her emotional and thematic counterpart. Both characters exist in service roles, both hide intensity behind exaggerated behavior, and both appear deeply loyal to their chosen families. Vivziepop's long-term planning suggests that this parallel isn't accidental. Season 4 could be the moment where Nifty's past is revealed, forcing her to confront someone who represents a darker reflection of herself. This kind of storytelling moves the show beyond simple good versus evil conflict. Instead, it leans into themes of found family, loyalty, and identity. Velvet's attachment to Vox and Valentino may run deeper than ambition. And if those bonds are severed, her response won't just be about power, it will be about grief. On the other side, Nifty's devotion to the hotel and its residents may finally be tested in a way that demands real sacrifice. What's especially compelling is that Vivziepop framed Season 4 as a transition point. It's where Act 2 begins to close and Act 3 starts to form. That means the story won't just be escalating, it will be narrowing. Loose threads will be tied up, side conflicts will be resolved, and characters who survive this phase will be pushed directly toward the final arc of the series. Season 4 isn't about introducing new problems, it's about confronting the consequences of everything that's already happened. In that sense, Velvet's potential rise isn't just another villain arc, it's a signal that the show is preparing for its endgame. The emotional stakes are getting higher, the character parallels are becoming clearer, and the story is slowly stripping away anything unnecessary, leaving only the conflicts that truly matter. By the time all of these pieces are laid out together, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Hazbin Hotel is no longer just building a story, it's closing in on one. Vivziepop's interview didn't give us shocking spoilers or dramatic reveals, but what it did give us was far more powerful. Clarity. Clarity about structure, clarity about intent, and clarity about the fact that everything we've watched so far has been preparation for something much bigger, much heavier, and much more emotionally demanding. Season 3 isn't just another chapter, it's the moment where the illusion of safety disappears. The hotel's mission, the idea of redemption, the balance of power in hell, all of it is about to be questioned. Characters who once felt comfortable in their roles may realize they've been standing on unstable ground the entire time. And when that realization hits, it won't just affect villains or side characters. It's going to reach Charlie. It's going to reach the hotel. And it's going to force everyone to ask whether the dream they've been chasing is even real. What makes this so compelling is that Vivziepop isn't rushing toward the ending. She's tightening the screws slowly. Season 3 introduces the truth. Season 4 deals with the fallout. And Season 5, if and when it arrives, is meant to be the collision point, where heaven, hell, and everything in between are forced to confront what they've become. That kind of storytelling doesn't rely on shock alone. It relies on emotional investment. And that's why the next few seasons matter more than anything that came before them. The villains are no longer just obstacles, they're reflections. Valentino represents unchecked cruelty and exploitation. Velvet may represent grief and revenge. Lilith represents something even more dangerous, truth buried so deep that revealing it could shatter the entire system. And on the other side, the heroes aren't clean or perfect either. They're flawed, uncertain, and standing at the edge of choices that will define who they really are. Redemption is no longer a simple goal, it's a question mark. And then there's the universe itself. The slow merging of Hazbin Hotel and Hell of a Boss isn't just fan service, it's a signal that the world is becoming whole, that the walls between stories are coming down, that what once felt like separate corners of hell are actually part of the same fate. When that merge fully happens, it won't just expand the story, it'll raise the emotional cost of every decision because nothing will exist in isolation anymore. This is why Vivziepop's interview matters so much, not because it told us exactly what will happen, but because it told us how we should be watching from now on. Every line of dialogue matters, every character moment matters, every season is pushing us closer to an ending that's been planned for years. And whether that ending is tragic, hopeful, or something far more complicated, it's clear that the story is no longer playing it safe. Now the real question is, are we ready for what Hazbin Hotel is about to become? If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into Hazbin Hotel, Hell of a Boss, and everything Vivziepop is building, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. And let me know in the comments, what do you think Season 3 is really setting up? Is redemption about to be redefined or completely destroyed?